Hi, Heidi.
Hi, Mike.
How's the body feeling today?
Really good, thank you. All the better for all the sunshine we're having. I am wearing my most colorful outfit, and I'm so sorry that this is audio only and no one can see it.
Yeah, they're missing out. It's very appropriately Easter themed. You've got the Easter bunny lifting weights on your t-shirt.
That's right. It's
Excellent.
coming up.
So one of the reasons I ask people that question is I want to know how they're feeling from our previous workout. So it's sometimes people will tell me, well, I'm really sore. And then you can kind of get into, well, is that a good sore? Is that a muscle soreness? Or is that like a pain, an ache? And, if it's the latter, it's something we want to pay more attention to. And sometimes it might be somebody's just sitting at their desk all day and they're stiff in a particular area. And that's also something we want to listen to. Maybe we can do some extra stretching or warm up. But it's not just sort of a rhetorical question. It helps guide exercise, our exercise selection for each workout.
And it fits perfectly into the topic of this episode of Deadlift for Glory. Welcome, everybody. My name's Heidi Walter. I'm a landscape designer in the Seattle area, and I am here with Coach Mike.
I'm Mike Harms, and I'm a personal trainer in Edmonds, Washington.
And today we want to talk about some more myth busting, and this time it's I am too old for strength training. Let's just start off by saying I think we're mainly talking about people who are starting and just taking up strength training in their 50s, because I would assume anybody who started in their 30s and 40s will not suddenly retire as soon as they're 50. Unless you're telling me there's a retirement age for strength training.
I'm not telling you that. Let me ask you this: do we really think that's a myth? I mean, do we think people believe that? I mean, have you? Because in my business, when people walk through the door of my gym, it's more like I'm ready. How do I start? So I certainly don't hear that a lot. People going, I'm too old. Do you hear that amongst your friends and colleagues?
I'm not hearing
Yeah.
it. I was wondering about it as well because, I did a little bit of, going to the gym in my 20s, a little more in my 30s, and then intermittently in my 40s, but I wouldn't call myself somebody who does strength training or has done strength training on a continuous basis. So, yeah, I was asking myself, am I too old? But really, the fact that I really needed to do something to boost my strength answered that question.
Sure.
And, the moment I was here, you didn't say, oh no, sorry, but you're 50, you're too old.
Right.
I'm now 52, and I definitely do not feel too old. I'm probably too old for certain records that I can no
Sure.
longer break. But no, I'm not. There's things that my body can and cannot do anymore. But apart from that, no. But I mean, that's not the end of this episode of our podcast,
Right.
right?
Right.
So there must be reasons why people, women especially, think that, and then there is something we can do to mitigate that concern. It's definitely a concern, right?
I would actually flip it around and I would say for folks who are 50 plus, why aren't you strength training? Why aren't you thinking about it? I mean, we know scientifically speaking that being 50 or over, male or female, it's a risk factor for osteoporosis, and that's a disease that can weaken our bones. So, strength training can help make our bones stronger. It can combat osteoporosis, and it can improve balance, which is super important in falls prevention. So I would actually flip it around and say, if we're 50 plus, are we doing strength training? What kind are we doing? And if not, how are we thinking about that? And why aren't we thinking about it if we're not?
What you're saying is strength training becomes even more important the older you get.
Thank you. Yes, that's a very succinct way of putting it. But then to get to your question about, I think you raised a valid question about, I do have people who come into my gym and said that they are concerned or they feel too old. Or I just wrote an article about this, and I interviewed one of my longest standing clients who's 77, and she said exactly that. She felt she was too old. She felt insecure. She felt like she wouldn't be able to do the exercises properly. And that was 6 years ago, when she first started training with me. So 6 years later, this is what she says to me now.
So she started in her early 70s?
She started, early 70s. And 7 years later, this is in the article I wrote about her, she says, I'm feeling more confident in my movements. She says, my posture is straighter. I have more energy. Friends have commented on my increased energy. So those are just some of the benefits. And then another one that I really liked is she said, I have a prescription for an anxiety medicine that I take as needed. I haven't felt the need for a pill since I began training. So that I think speaks to some of the benefits, the emotional and mood boosting benefits of strength training. So just one example of how strength training has been life-changing for an older woman.
Yeah, so definitely don't be discouraged or put off by strength training and by the weights. And I think when we're replacing the word strength with weight training, which I often hear, that probably gets closer to why people might be intimidated. Because I'm looking around your gym, right, which is where we're recording this podcast, and I see this massive, massive kettlebells and dumbbells. And they would intimidate me. My back hurts just looking at them. At the same time, even heavy weights are not forbidden for women over 50, right?
Absolutely.
They should not be taboo.
For sure. I think you're also getting into our next point, which is one of the concerns of older adults or maybe any adult who walks into a gym is I'll get hurt. And I think that's the next myth versus reality we wanted to talk about when it comes to strength training. If I take up strength training, I'm going to injure myself.
But I think that comes down to you having a very open and honest conversation with hopefully your personal trainer or somebody who introduces you to this workout, where you say, okay, this is how my body is feeling, this is injuries I've had in the past, this is where it hurts at the moment, and this is what I'm concerned about. And then any professional should be able to give you advice.
Yeah, I think,
do.
correct. I think this is one area where a personal trainer can really help, and that's in helping you perform exercises with the right form, with a proper amount of starting weight. And both of those things are going to help decrease your injury risk. I had a client, a female client, who came into the gym, and she had an injury in the gym. It was kind of a freak injury. She had been in a box gym, and she was doing some exercise, and somebody had put a weight down behind her, and she tripped over it, and she did significant damage to her lower body. And she was terrified. She was terrified she's going to get injured again. She didn't want to go back into a gym. And, I think this is where the personal training environment was really beneficial to her. We could work in more of a controlled space. We went over exercise form and weight and just sort of doing it in a very controlled, safe fashion. And you could just see her getting more and more confident. So she worked to the point where she asked me for exercise that she can go do in her own gym. And she did those by herself, working out independently in the gym on her own. So she got back into the gym, which is to say, if you invest in a personal trainer and you learn these exercises properly, it's not something you have to invest in indefinitely. This can be a starting point where then you can take this knowledge and, go do your own thing with it.
Yeah. So trust the professional, have a conversation. And whenever you do feel that something is painful and it's a pain where you're not sure that this is a good pain, so to speak, let them know.
That's a great point. I think as clients, and I've had personal trainers of my own, that is our responsibility, is to speak up, whether we have a question, whether we're confused, or whether something doesn't feel good. I mean, we know our bodies better than anybody else. And to go back to that question I asked you when you walked through the door, how is your body feeling? That's really valuable training feedback for your trainer, so we can understand. And it may be a situation where I'm watching you, Heidi, do your deadlift, and your form may look really good, but if you're feeling it somewhere and it doesn't feel good, that's something that we want to talk about. And there's, there are certain types of pain that we want to work through, and we'll talk about that. No pain, no gain myth. But then there are other things that we absolutely want to listen to and modify if we need to.
Yeah, because I think there's also a certain mental block that you put on yourself. If you are worried about injuries, you're basically you're just not relaxed enough, right? You're a bit tight and tense, and that's not a good position from which to do any training.
Right.
So, talk it through, get into a position where you're relaxed and you trust your trainer, and then go for it.
So to recap, I'm too old to lift weights, myth or reality?
Nobody is too old to lift weights.
Agreed. agree 100%. And then I'll get hurt, myth or reality.
You can get hurt. You can get hurt stepping out of your bed. I mean, you shouldn't, and there's ways to prevent it.
Right.
And if you do get hurt, there are ways to heal and mitigate this, but hopefully it doesn't happen a lot. And hurt, though, and I'm sure now we're going to segue into our second myth. Hurt, I think it's not the same as pain.
Agree. And then the last thing I would say about hurt is I think you encapsulated it properly, which is you can get hurt doing anything, but injury shouldn't be, fear of injury shouldn't be a blocker to folks who are thinking about strength training. There are ways that you can mitigate those risks by learning to do the exercises properly with the right amount of starting weight that can greatly reduce your injury risk.
Which is not to say, I think I should add this, which is not to say that when you're going to the gym, you should expect to get some major injury.
Right.
If that happens, something went wrong. And that shouldn't happen. Right.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we've already talked about it several times now. No pain, no gain. Which sounds like a thing my granny would say.
Or my PE teacher would say, or my high school coach would say.
Or my PT would say a few years ago when I needed them, work through the pain.
Was this a PT you had in the US or was this a PT you had in Germany or elsewhere?
No, that was here in Seattle.
Because I've had a lot of PT and I've never had a PT tell me that. So that's interesting that you've had one tell you that.
Maybe he sussed me out. Maybe he knew I was German.
You knew you had a high threshold for pain.
I've heard that one before.
You do. I've seen it.
Yeah. But still, no pain, no gain. What is behind this? Is it a myth? And does that mean we all need to just be stoic and just embrace it?
Yeah.
What does it mean?
Yeah, I think it's a great question. So I'm just going to come out and say I think it's a myth. I think, it's sort of an outdated, if you will, assessment of how one should work out. But I think, like anything, there's a lot of nuances to it. The New York Times had an article just very recently, and the title was 5 Exercises We Hate But We Should Do Anyway. Do you want to take a guess what those exercises were?
Squats?
Yep.
Was it push-ups?
No.
Oh.
Plank, though, so kind of you're in that
Yeah.
plank position. So that's 2. Want some help, or you want to keep guessing?
Anything to do with abs. So
Well, plank,
crunches?
plank,
Okay,
yeah.
no crunches?
Burpee, which is utilizes the core. So it was squats, planks, burpees, deadlifts, and jumping. And when I first saw that article, I said, why would you write an article like that? Why would you encourage people to do exercises that they hate? I'm a strong believer in the best exercise program is one that we're going to stick with. And if we're filling our exercise program with exercises that we hate, we're not going to stick to it. But the article quoted a personal trainer. It said, no one likes to do things that they aren't good at. But change happens when we get a little uncomfortable. So I think that's where that sort of no pain, no gain can work in our favor. But I think the key word there is little. We have to understand, sort of what's that pain that is going, good pain, if you will. And then she says a very important thing, which is every exercise can be modified and any version of an exercise counts. So then that article kind of made sense to me. So if I, for example, think burpees are not a good exercise for a variety of reasons, there's a lot of ways you can do it dangerously. You can do other exercises that are just as effective without that sort of high intensity movement. I do like the fact that they say any exercise can be modified, and I think that's true. I mean, you take a deadlift, for example, and you think of all the ways that you've progressed in your deadlift. I mean, we started just with body weight resistant movements, and we moved up to a kettlebell and to other implements that help you practice the parts of the deadlift that are required, but do them safely. So my point is, I think just the idea of going in and working our body past the point of exhaustion is dangerous. But part of what we do with strength training is we need to increase our load incrementally over time. And that's where pushing ourselves beyond certain limits is valuable.
Yeah. And I mean, pushing our bodies past the point of exhaustion is one thing. The other thing is with strength training, with weights, literally, you feel it the next day because you're sore. And I always see this as a confirmation that I've done something right.
Right.
I've never thought, oh my God, I have sore muscles, my legs, my arms are feeling sore. What did I do? I must do less. No way. Right?
And I would say conversely, if we work out and we're not sore the next day, that doesn't mean we've had a bad workout. It means that our body is getting accustomed to the movements that we're doing. I mean, it may be sort of a nudge that we want to try something different or increase our load incrementally. But yeah, soreness is not necessarily meaning pushing ourselves into the red zone, for example. There was an Olympic weightlifter had to withdraw from qualifying for the Olympics for 2024 because she was injured. But she posted this quote to Instagram, which I thought was fantastic. And it was about learning from injury. And what she said was, her name is Maddie Rogers. And she said, if anyone gets a lesson from this, it's take rest seriously. Even when you feel invincible, you're not. None of us are. Just because you can push through doesn't mean you always should. Rest is your friend, not the enemy. You won't get behind from resting when you really need it, only by not doing so. When you're in the game for longevity, it's a balance between the two. It's a hard and it will never feel not stressful, but trust your body and trust your gut. Rest will take you further than burnout. So I think that's a great sort of stance on it. I mean, this is someone who lifts weights for a career. And what she's saying is don't underestimate the importance of rest and recovery. So I think that sort of speaks to what we're talking about here with no pain, no gain.
I hope this was painless to listen to. And we will hear you. You will hear us at the next episode. Thank you for listening. And remember, you are stronger than you think.